At the wheel of this car is a man torn between two worlds. He's an Arab sheikh who was born in an old Arabia and will die in a new one. He worships Allah, loves the desert, and is one of the richest men in the world. Zaid's tastes have not been influenced much by his money. He likes the simple life, to drive himself, to go hunting and camping in the desert, to be with his people as a sheikh should be, to follow the ways of the old Arabia. Five or 6 years ago, the people of Abu Dhabi were sunk in the poverty of 1,000 years or more. The 20th century had passed them by. Today, their ruler, Zaid, is one of Arabia's nouveau riche, who's acquired overnight a fortune from oil. His income could give $5,000 a year to every man, woman, and child in the place, enough to make Zaid a multimillionaire. Superficially, the old customs are unchanged. The tent goes up as it always did. The food is prepared as simply as before. Zaid's natural pace is leisurely, almost indolent. Time is about the only thing the desert's been rich in until now. Time for coffee, time for talk, time made into ritual from century to century, from morning till night. These girls will swing their hair, and these men will chant hour after hour. In the desert, there's no rush. At least, that's how it used to be. But Zaid, with his money, has begun to learn better. In this palace in Abu Dhabi, Zaid had a brother. His name was Shakput, and for more than 30 years he ruled Abu Dhabi in poverty and comparative peace. Shakput's rule was traditional. His word was law, but he stayed close to his people. Anyone was free to talk to him any day in the Majlis, the tribal council, and as long as they had no money, they were all relatively contented. And then in the 1960s, Abu Dhabi struck it rich, and its troubles started. In a year or two, people were demonstrating about work and wages who'd never had either in their lives before. The grumbles grew as the money mounted, because Shakput was a miser. All his life, he'd been a poor man. Now that he was rich, the skinflint habits stuck. And like a man who's won first prize in a lottery, he found his money made few friends. People began to say his brother, Zaid, would be a better ruler. He had a mind more open to the world. He was generous. He was a man's man. But Zaid had sworn to his mother years ago that he would never harm Shakput, and for 5 more years he stayed loyal, and the people waited. The oil flowed. The money poured in, but Shakput wouldn't spend it. He was paralyzed by habit, suspicion, and downright fear. He knew the harsh old world of Arabia. He couldn't meet the challenge of the rich new one. By 1966, just 5 years after oil had first been found in Abu Dhabi, Shakput's wealth destroyed him. Zaid sent him into exile and took command himself, ready to say farewell to the old Arabia. But how was he going to do it? Even with a new ruler, the old life still goes on. A timeless, patient life, dominated by the desert and the unforgiving sun. Arabia is a land of terrible heat and terrible bareness. A tract of desert as big as Western Europe, practically untouched by the world until a few years ago. To anybody who doesn't live there, it seems a land of mystery and romance, full of the exotic promise of the veil. There are still people who think of it as the land of harems and the Arabians. In reality, it's a harsh and lonely place. Only water makes Arabia bearable. Where there's water, there's life. Water is so important that the Arabian oasis became the direct inspiration of the Muslim idea of heaven. And no wonder, when you come to the cool shade of the date gardens after the heat and emptiness of the desert, the oasis seems literally heavenly, a place of pure pleasure. Every well in the desert is like a port. The camel caravans cross the desert like ships cross the sea. There are no frontiers, no fixed territory, no land belonging to anyone. There are just the wandering Bedouin and their camels, as attached to each other as sailors and their ships, bringing their trade to the desert markets. It's a hard life in Arabia, and it breeds hard men, but it's as perfectly adjusted now to the hard land it's lived in as it was in the days of Abraham, the father of all the tribes. There's still a sort of biblical rhythm about it. If you want to know what the loaves looked like in the Bible parable, here they are, baking in Arabia today just as they did 2,000 years ago on the shores of Galilee. And I don't suppose the fish have changed much either. The women of Arabia still hide behind the veil, as Arabia itself has done for centuries. Around the coasts, the Arab boats are made today by hand and eye and ancient equipment, much as they were when the spice trade and the slave trade kept them busy from China to the shores of Africa. To the Arabs, the sea was a source of wealth that the barren land could not provide. Fishing, hurling, trading, smuggling, and especially piracy. Arab sailors in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf preyed on the ships of Europe in the Indian trade. In the end, their piracy was their downfall. With a few naval sloops and some of the queerest treaties ever devised by man, the British Empire imposed on 2/3 of Arabia's coast the thin red line of peace. But neither the empire nor peace got much further than that. The sea was all anybody cared about. As long as that was safe, the land could rot, and so it did, in neglect and perpetual tribal warfare. Beyond the coast, most of Arabia lay untouched until 20 years ago. God is great. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. The religion of Arabia, by tradition, is as forbidding as the land. It's nearly 14 centuries since Arabia was the birthplace of Islam, but it's still the home of the most devoted of all the followers of Muhammad. Islam means submission to the will of God. In the desert, there isn't much you can do but submit and pray for God's mercy. Submission makes everyone equal. A ruler like Zaid is no different from other men in the sight of God. He submits like them, and wherever he is, he prays like them, and with them too.
Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
The Prophet decreed that the faithful must pray 5 times a day, from dawn to dusk. You can pray together or alone, with a priest or without one. But your submission to God is complete. You're his slave. And you can count on your fingers like a rosary in 99 different ways. May God be praised. May God be praised. May God be praised. Oil has ended the centuries of Arabian isolation. Oil means money. It's worth nearly $6,000 million a year around the Persian Gulf alone. And although most of the Arabian oil fields have been in production less than 20 years, their wealth is cracking the old life of Arabia wide open. To most of us, oil may be just the stuff that drives the car. To Arabia, it's a revolution. There isn't a thing it leaves untouched. It makes the desert rich. It brings the prospectors and the lawyers and the map makers to divide it. For the first time in history, oil brings soldiers to enforce peace inside Arabia. Frontiers need soldiers to patrol them. Prospectors need soldiers to protect them. So the tribesmen who once fought each other and raided the ships and commerce of the world are paid and trained as soldiers to maintain the new law. The poachers of 1,000 years have been turned in a generation into gamekeepers.
شباب من اليسار أديتان تاب Stop, wait, stop, wait, stop! Stop, wait, stop, wait, stop, wait, stop! Shut up!
245, sir. 245.
Money begins to make its mark everywhere. The sheikh gets millions, the soldier only a scrap, but it buys a new life for both of them.
302, sir. 302. You attain one.
On his hunting trip, Zaid chases the desert game with a string of falcons as long as his purse. 20 years ago, he'd probably have gone hunting on foot, with only a few birds to help him. Now he takes anything up to 100. Each of Zaid's followers has a falcon to look after. They train them, stroke them, talk to them, practically sleep with them. Like racehorses, they're the pampered darlings of a rich man's camp. And like racehorses, they cost big money. A good bird will fetch $600 or more, imported from Syria or Iraq. And with so much oil money in Arabia now, the price is rising every year. Nothing escapes the touch of money. Money changes all relationships. When Zaid visits his neighbors now, the traditional feast for a visitor becomes an offering to a wealthy benefactor instead. Unlike many of Arabia's oil millionaires, Zaid believes in sharing his wealth. He told me once, the oil business is like a lottery. I might still be poor and my neighbors might be rich, so we ought to help each other. He's already given away millions. Zaid's host at this feast was one of his poorest neighbors. But now that Zaid has touched his palm with silver, he won't be quite so poor. The feast is traditional. Goat's meat, chicken and rice. And when the VIPs are finished, the lesser men move in. It's always the custom in Arabia for the poor to eat at the rich man's table, or rather, off the rich man's floor. When this lot are finished, there'll still be more to come, in descending order of rank and ascending order of hunger. It's not the most elegant spectacle, and it's not the choicest food, but in a harsh and hungry land, any excuse is welcome for a blowout, especially when it's held for a man with money.
لي صفا ونزاح همي ولا باس ان قلت جرب لي القلم باهتمامه ما دام فكري سالي كل هو جاس اكتب معانا ان قلتها بالتمامه معنا على ما دار قلب واحتاس.
The old Arabia pulls at the heart. The world where Zaid was raised, and where he always likes to be. Around the campfire in the cool desert night, among his men, listening to those endless Arab fairy tales that the audience knows as well as the storyteller, of love and beauty and the 1001 nights. When the hunting's over and the caravan's resting, this is how they've passed the time for 1,000 years. This is the old and sometimes beautiful Arabia, where time is endless and patience more so.
هذيك الأقواس والسحر والقتل.
But in the new Arabia, time is money, and that pulls at the purse strings. This is the Arabia of the air-conditioned desert, the sanitized, sterilized caravan of the 20th century, with its international wealth and international accents.
You can't play pool, let's play darts. I can play darts.
For these people, the old Arabia hardly exists. The mystery and the romance, or the harshness and the poverty, it's all one in the oil company's pay packet.
See you guys later.
To them, Arabia is just another job. The fairy tale is over, and everyone now will live happily ever after in the dream world of the Arabian Nights.
ولو مثلا قلت نجد فالإنسان المحبوبة ما يسوق الله.
But in the real world of Arabia tomorrow, it's not so easy. Not even Zaid's best friends can promise him a happy ending to his modern fairy tale that's only just begun. You can't reconcile the old life with $100 million a year, as his brother Shakbut learned. You can't even choose whether you'll have the old life or the new. God and the oil business have already chosen for you. From now on, you can only try to ride the terrible tiger of the 20th century and wonder if it will not eat you in the end. By the international jets and the local runabouts, the vultures of world commerce descend on Zaid's little kingdom. They're perfectly decent vultures, just bankers and businessmen doing their job. $100 million a year is a nice piece of export market to get your hands on, especially when the place so obviously needs your help. Ten years ago, when I first came to Abu Dhabi, there was only one plane a week. Now there's more than one a day, and the old place can't quite cope.
I've been here before. I don't know, there's been quite some improvement here in 4 years since I've been here. I fully expect to see some floor shows when I get on into town.
With some striptease also?
Well, no, that's a little too much.
In Abu Dhabi town, at first sight, there isn't much sign of change. Shakbut's static rule left the town nearly as squalid as it always had been. And some of these people hardly know yet what's going to hit them. Now Zaid's ready to spend his millions. The alleys are still dark and dirty. The beggars wait patiently for the faithful Muslims to do their duty as the Prophet ordained and give them alms. This is what Arabs call the souk, the bazaar or marketplace. And in Abu Dhabi, it's Bond Street and Fifth Avenue and the neighborhood supermarket all rolled into one. For the Arabs of the desert, it's got everything we mean by bright lights and the big city. It's not much of a place, but this is where 20,000 people are going to share Zaid's inheritance of 100 million a year. Some of them have got a share in it already. They've bought big cars to go bumping over the unmade tracks. Big lorries to cash in on the building boom. And they've also learned to throw them away, like all good modern men. There are 4- and 5-floor office blocks instead of shanties, and concrete instead of mud. The modern world, our world, is taking over. I remember, for instance, not long ago, when there wasn't a single bank in Abu Dhabi. Now, these buildings are all banks. Money in the bank means money to buy with, and the beach at Abu Dhabi is piled with purchases. Abu Dhabi was built on a sandbank, so it's never had a proper harbour. But that didn't matter much when there was nothing but a few dates to ship out and a few tins to ship in. Now the whole modern world is dumped into the sand. Air conditioners and deep freezers, timber and steel, cement and typewriters, fans and filing cabinets. You name it, and you'll find it here, sweeping in like a tidal wave on the old Arabian shore. We call these construction machines. They're also weapons of destruction. They can rip up an old road or knock down an old house even faster than they can build new ones. And in Arabia now they can and do tear an old way of life to shreds before a new one has properly begun. Not that many Arabs object. In fact, most of them are only too glad to help with the destruction of their old way of life. They can see the vision of a better life in a bulldozer, and they want a piece of it. That someone is the ruler, Zaid. Troy himself just as surely, illustration of the future. Like Shakbut, he still holds his majlis every day, so that his people can meet him, greet him, talk to him and complain to him in the traditional desert way. The ritual is unchanged. The coffee is served. Time, motion, and people seem as leisurely as ever. But behind the appearance of tradition, the revolution is creeping in. Welcome to the international businessmen. Welcome to the salesmen, to the experts, to science and high finance. Maybe welcome to the con men, too, until Zaid learns to pick them from the rest. Of course, they all sit down together. And of course, they're all equal, East and West, the world and Arabia, the courtesies of the old world, mingling with the business of the new. But it's the newcomers in business suits who get the places of honor at Zaid's side. And not just because Arab hospitality demands they should be favored. They're there because they represent power. The power to provide the people of Abu Dhabi with anything Zaid can now afford to buy. Still, the ritual goes on, balancing the new with the old. The first thing a visitor must do in Arabia is to learn patience. You can sit for hours in places like this and never do anything but ask after each other's health. All in good time and all by the will of God. Never do today what you can put off till tomorrow. Never act if you can talk instead. The tribesman with a problem comes to Zaid to sort it out. And everybody else must wait. Patience and still more patience. But now there's $100 million of good hard cash burning a hole in patience every year. That's business that won't wait. It may be the will of God that's given it to Abu Dhabi, but it's the will of man, and especially the will of Zaid, that has to decide what to do with it now. 5 years after the oil began to flow, Abu Dhabi got nothing but piecemeal changes. Now Zayed has come to power with a plan to make Abu Dhabi the model state of Arabia, with all the paraphernalia of development. In the first few months of his rule, he awarded $70 million worth of contracts, and he's out every day to spur on the men who are making him a brand new kingdom.
And this will be going out approximately a mile, and then the second stage, which will be done next spring or next summer, whenever Your Highness decides, would continue on out into the very deep water for the large freighters, the large ships.
طال عمرك يقول هو هذا الدفن اللي انتم تكلمتوا عليه، يعني اللي طلبتوا منه الدفن هو اللي يطلع ميل واحد.
The machines that come ashore on the beach are pounding the desert into new shapes. The men who descend from the aeroplanes are drafting a world where time and opportunity have changed places. Yesterday, time seemed endless and the opportunities few. Today, time is short and the opportunities are infinite.
Going out for approximately a mile, which we had discussed with you in your office when Mr. Griesbach, our design engineer, was here a month ago.
Zayed told me once he didn't know what would happen in 10 years' time, but he felt he must give everything to his people.
Of course, the smaller the DC-3s, it would take quite a few. See, one of the difficulty things, we don't know how many aircraft will be coming in here, Your Highness, and this is one of the things which you yourself will have to decide how many airlines you'll permit to come into Abu Dhabi. And this will, of course, govern the number of aircraft here at any one time.
Decide, choose, act. Sometimes under these new imperatives, Zayed acts pretty hastily and harshly. He dismissed this plan for a new souk in Abu Dhabi with scarcely a moment's thought.
Small scale, no, yes, oh yes. We'd have to show detailed plans. Yes, bigger.
استوي هذا على حسب رضاكم إذا ما
لا 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 أنا مو براضي عن هذا ولا.
No, 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 never, never, never. Take it away and start again. So 2 months' work is demolished in a moment. He who pays the piper calls the tune. In the courtyard of Zayed's palace, the centuries slide back again. A moment ago, Zayed was the modern oil tycoon, aloof and decisive. Now he's back in the role of sheikh, the universal uncle to his people, the feudal lord with his followers, in procession to the daily feast. To the tribesmen of the desert, used to bread and dates in the sand, Zayed's table is a revelation. It's loaded with more food than many of them have ever seen, and it really is a table, and not just the floor. The idea of a free meal for all Zayed's followers is traditional, and he rarely sits down with less than 50 men. But the forms and the food are new. Money talks here through waiters in black ties, through plates and soup spoons, and a whole new ritual of table manners to master. Like the newly rich in any part of the world, the Arabs of Abu Dhabi are learning to keep up with the Joneses. Snobbery is the latest local vice.
يمكن هناك شيء سر.
These are our rulers.
These are our rulers.
Good. What's this?
That's the door.
Yes, say, that's the door.
That's the door.
What's that?
That's the ceiling.
And what's this?
While the fathers learn new manners, a few of their sons learn new tongues. Foreign languages and foreign teachers bring foreign ideas.
That's the ceiling.
Yes.
This is the floor.
Good.
Here's a pencil.
Good.
Here's a ruler. There's a picture. Say it again.
Good. Now all together, stand up. Yes, that's the window. Huh. That's the window.
That's the door. That's the ceiling. This is the floor. Here's a pencil. Here's a ruler. There's a picture. Say it again.
فإذا انشقت السماء وكانت فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان.
But the old ways are still the only ways for most of Arabia's children. Schools like this, where the boys learn the Holy Quran by heart, haven't changed in 1,000 years. It's still the only sort of school most kids ever see, if they're lucky enough to see a school at all. The romance of the old Arabia was always a bit of an illusion. In reality, the place was, and still is, full of desperate poverty and sickness. There wasn't a single hospital in Abu Dhabi until a few years ago, and doctors were hardly ever seen.
I've not wanted to exist, these patients being in all together, but we've been working on it, and we haven't come up with a good answer, simply because we don't have enough staff to watch all the doors. We lock the front door, and they come in the back door or the side door. So we have gotten sort of used to it over the years, so that now we don't mind it much. When they're all in there together, it's their hard luck if they can't have the privacy of a personal examination with a doctor. The little children often have diarrheas or fever, colds, and sores and abscesses and such to take care of. And then the local Arabs seem to have their share of accidents, falling out of a palm tree or off of a camel. And they seem to be sort of dangerous. They may fracture a limb or break a hip. And most all of the people are suffering from eye ailments of one sort or another, from the youngest child to the oldest man, with the ailment of trachoma, which is about 99% prevalent here. Many of them are suffering from tuberculosis. More and more we are detecting this disease as we go on with X-ray. تمام هذا تمام هذا الحين نريد نفس صدرك شوية ها
نرايك
بس من هني.
Tradition still throws a veil around the women of Arabia that even the doctor can't quite penetrate. His examinations here are probings in the dark.
وين يعود أكثر أكثر هني شوية هني شو هذا هذا أوكل من أول
وسم ذي
وسم.
The women are the most conservative force of all, secluded, unchanging, uneducated, and fatalistic. They accept their lot meekly, and they do their duty faithfully as the handmaidens and chattels of men. But for how much longer, when even under the thorn bush the doctor arrives with his medicine, and every jab with a syringe becomes a sort of revolution? Some of it may be still a bit like faith healing. No doctor's skill could have cured this man's tuberculosis. The most that medicine could do was to give him a sort of comfort on the way to death. But if the 20th century medicine doesn't always work, it does challenge that submission to the will of God that accepts death whenever it likes to strike. So Islam itself comes under attack. God's will always seems more flexible when you can meet it with a millionaire's money.
I have the honor to present the estimates for Abu Dhabi for the year 1967. The total revenue, as estimated, is 41,202,080 dinars.
For the ruler, the days are over when he had so little money that nobody cared how he spent it. Now Zaid must have a budget and a British accountant to keep the books.
Development expenditure is estimated at 23,275,671 dinars.
Every penny is another nail in the coffin of the old Arabia, and maybe in the life of Zaid too.
Dinar. You haven't included the airport building here, the terminal building.
The airport building hasn't been tendered for.
It hasn't been tendered for. But this goes in the lump sum.
That goes in the lump sum of 10 million down here. Yes. When I said that this included all the expenditure, there are things like the police, for instance, where it's impossible to get a true estimate. We have to wait the arrival of the new people to give us these estimates. I've put in 1/3 dinars for them to give them authority to spend.
Outside Zaid's office, time still seems endless and patience still comes easily. His people have given up their lives to Allah. What God wills, they still accept. But the signs of dissolution are all around them, like the leisurely old world's cast-off furniture and the new office chairs that are waiting to take its place. As the offices grow, the people seem to shrink. When Zaid was simply the leader of a tribe, these men could meet him every day. Now he's the administrator of a modern state. He's forced to shut them out of his life. They can only wait while the world moves in a business suit. Even Zaid is a little less sure of himself. He can ask the new questions and make new demands, but who can give him the answers?
You see, His Highness, for this year, of course, we're giving him something very approximate.
Yeah.
But for next year's, he'd like it as precise as possible.
Well, I'm hoping that the exercise in the coming year will give us the material for next year, but at the moment there's nothing to go on.
From their uncertainty about the new way of life, Zaid and his men go back to the desert as often as they can. The desert is still home, the place they knew before they were rich, and the only place they will really know until the day they die. In the desert for a day or a week or a month, they can go back to their old and simpler ways, to a genuine sense of comradeship that the modern world leaves no time for. There are no budgets and civil servants here, no plans, no figures, no complications, no closed office doors. There's the sky, the heat, the emptiness, and the infinity of time that they've always understood. Out here, they can all be sure of themselves again. They can relax and be men again. Or perhaps, being only men, they can just be boys. Even Zaid, the ruler, can let his hair down here and be one of the boys fighting a mock battle with his secretary. On trips like this, the desert is an escape, a recovery of innocence, a return to Eden. But like all escapes, it's also an illusion. The innocence is lost and will never be recaptured, because the old Arabia of isolation, hardship, and tribal war in which it flourished has been swept into the world at last. The unknown land has been more than just discovered. It's been uncovered in the past 10 or 20 years and dragged naked into everybody's sight. Of course, this doesn't mean that the old Arabia has disappeared in the space of the last few years. It's still a hard land that breeds a hard people. Tough individuals like Zaid and his men, and some of them still fighting a rearguard action against the assaults of the modern world. All the same, in the end, the 20th century brooks no defaulters. Here in Arabia, one of the last of the lonely lands is surrendering its old independence. From now on, its people will have to face, like the rest of us, the infinite hopes, possibilities, and disillusionments of the modern, universal world.
الإمارات المتصالحة في ساحل عمان تتألف من 7 إمارات تقوم في كل منها إدارة مستقلة وترتبط جميعها بمعاهدة وئام وإخاء. وأول هذه الإمارات من الناحية الغربية هي أبو ظبي، وهي أكبرها مساحة، ويرعى أحوالها حاكمها الشيخ شخبوط بن سلطان، ومقره في هذا القصر الشامخ الذي يدير منه شؤون بلاده. وبعد ذلك توجد إمارة عجمان، وحاكمها الشيخ راشد بن حميد النعيمي، وهذا هو قصره ومقر الإدارة في إمارته. ثم هناك إمارة أم القوين، وحاكمها الشيخ أحمد بن راشد المعلى. ومن أهم هذه الإمارات كذلك الشارجة، وحاكمها الأديب الشاعر الشيخ صقر بن سلطان القاسمي. وإلى الشرق من الشارجة تقع إمارة رأس الخيمة، وحاكمها الشيخ صقر بن محمد. وإلى الجنوب توجد واحة، ويتولى أمورها الشيخ زايد بن سلطان شقيق حاكم أبو ظبي. ومعظم السكان في هذه الإمارات يعتمدون في معاشهم على صيد الأسماك. فمثلا هنا في رأس الخيمة ترى هؤلاء الصيادين وقد عادوا من صيدهم محملين بأسماك الخليج المشهورة، وهم شأنهم شأن صيادي العالم أجمع، يعتنون بشباكهم التي هي عماد صناعتهم ومورد رزقهم. وبالإضافة إلى ذلك هناك القبائل التي تعيش في داخلية البلاد، وهم يعتنون بالدرجة الأولى بتربية الإبل التي هي مصدر رزقهم ومعاشهم، ويجلبون عليها منتجات الصحراء الداخلية والمناطق الجبلية إلى المدن. والآن نأتي إلى دبي، مركز الإدارة والتجارة في الإمارات المتصالحة. ودبي مدينة كبيرة وحولها الآبار والمراعي، ويسكنها حوالي 40,000 نسمة، يعتمدون في معيشتهم على الاستيراد والتصدير، وكذلك على البيع والشراء. سواء على مقياس صغير في الأزقة والأحياء أو على مقياس كبير في مركز المدينة التجاري، حيث تجري الصفقات لبيع البضائع والإبل وغير ذلك من المنتوجات. ولا ننسى أن نشير إلى تربية طيور الشاهين أو الصقر الذي يدرب لصيد الحضارة. إنهم لم يركنوا إلى انتظار اكتشاف الزيت في بلادهم، رغم أن عمليات التفتيش عنه وحفر آباره مستمرة كما يجري في الجويزة مثلا في إمارة الشارجة. بل لقد أدرك الحكام والشيوخ بحكمتهم وبعد نظرهم أن أعمال العمران يجب أن تبدأ حالا دون انتظار، وذلك لرفع مستوى معيشة رعاياهم. ولكن هذه المنطقة التي قلما ينزل فيها المطر تحتاج في عمرانها ورقيها إلى توافر الماء الذي يحيي ثمار الأرض، وهو أمر يدركه الحكام والشيوخ ويعملون على توفيره بجميع الوسائل. وها هو الشيخ زايد بن سلطان شقيق حاكم أبو ظبي أمير البريمي، ومعه الشيخ سعيد بن شخبوز نجل حاكم أبو ظبي يتولى بنفسه عمليات العثور على الماء. إنه يبدي اهتماما متزايدا بهذه العملية، فيتشاور مع خبراء الأفلاج أي الآبار القديمة عن أماكن توافر المياه، وكل الدلائل تشير إلى وجودها، إذ تتوافر القرائن عن بقايا مزارع وقنوات كانت موجودة في الماضي، ولن يمضي وقت طويل حتى يكلل مسعاهم بالنجاح إن شاء الله، وكل من جد وجد. ومنطقة البريمي تتألف من واحات عديدة فيها المياه، ولكن ذلك لا يمنع الشيخ زايد عن بذل الجهود لمضاعفة توافر المياه بحيث يمكن التوسع في الزراعة. وما أحلى منظر الماء الرقراق يتدفق غزيرا في رأس الخيمة، إذ هنا في مركز التجارب الزراعية يتوافر الماء بكثرة ويتدفق بصورة منظمة في القنوات وفي الأنابيب لري الأرض وإنبات الزرع. نعم، بفضل توافر الماء أمكن في هذا المركز زرع الخضار وزرع الفواكه على أنواعها المختلفة التي تناسب طبيعة الأرض. كل ذلك يجري تحت إشراف الخبير الفني في مركز التجارب ومساعده الشاب العربي، اللذين يعملان على تدريب السكان في استعمال أحدث الآلات الزراعية وأساليب الزراعة على أصولها. أضف إلى ذلك أن المركز يهتم أيضا بتربية الأبقار الحلوبة التي جلبت إلى رأس الخيمة من بلاد بعيدة مثل الهند وباكستان وغيرهما. كل ذلك يجري بمساعدة حكومة صاحبة الجلالة وتحت رعايتها. ويبدي حاكم رأس الخيمة الشيخ صقر بن محمد اهتماما بهذه المشاريع، فيقوم بنفسه بتفقدها وتشجيع رعاياه على الإقبال عليها للاستفادة منها أقصى الاستفادة. وقد أخذ حكام الإمارات وسكانها يقبلون على استخدام وسائل النقل الحديثة في أسفارهم كالطائرات، ونرى هنا حاكم الفجيرة الشيخ محمد بن حمد الشرقي يمتطي طائرة من طائرات شركة طيران الخليج في مطار الشارجة في إحدى زياراته لها. ولا يقتصر اهتمام الحكام والشيوخ على الشؤون الزراعية، بل إنهم دأبوا على تشجيع العلم في بلادهم. وفي الشارجة يقوم حاكمها الأديب الشاعر بتوفير المدارس لأبناء وبنات رعاياه، ففتح المدرسة القاسمية التي تضم أكثر من 500 تلميذ. وقد ساهمت الحكومة البريطانية بتكاليف بناء المدرسة، كما ساهم بتوفير المعلمين لها سمو أمير الكويت. ومن بين المدرسين عدد من أبناء الشارجة نفسها يعملون جنبا إلى جنب مع عدد من أبناء البلاد العربية الأخرى. ولا تفوت مناسبة دون أن يقوم الشيخ صقر بن سلطان القاسمي بتشجيع التلاميذ والمشرفين على التعليم في إمارته بالنهوض برجال وأمهات المستقبل. والصحة والمعالجة الطبية تلاقي أيضا كل رعاية وعناية، وقد وجه الاهتمام لرعاية الصحة ومعالجة المرضى في جميع أنحاء الإمارات. وهنا في دبي يوجد مستشفى آل مكتوم الذي جرى بناؤه بمساهمة حاكم دبي الشيخ سعيد بن مكتوم ونجله الشيخ راشد بن سعيد، كما أن حكومة صاحبة الجلالة قامت بتزويد هذا المستشفى بالمعدات والأجهزة الطبية الحديثة، ويعمل في المستشفى أطباء خبيرون يؤدون فيه العمليات الجراحية ومعالجة المرضى من مختلف الأمراض. وبالإضافة إلى المستشفى توجد العيادات الطبية التي أقامتها حكومة صاحبة الجلالة في مختلف الإمارات، ويقوم طبيب متجول بالسفر بانتظام إلى هذه العيادات حتى يوفر على المرضى مشقة السفر إلى أماكن بعيدة للتداوي. وتسير في ركاب ذلك كله حركة عمرانية واسعة، وخصوصا في مدينة دبي، حيث تجري أعمال البناء على قدم وساق. كما تجري أعمال فتح الطرق التي تتولى القيام بها بلدية المدينة. وتسهر على رعاية الأمن في دبي شرطة نشيطة من الخيالة ومن المشاة. ودبي تقوم على جانبي الخور الذي يقسمها إلى قسمين، هما دبي وديرة. والحركة في الميناء تنشط نشاطا كبيرا، وفيها المستودعات لخزن البضائع. وترسل في الميناء باستمرار السفن والمراكب الشراعية تحمل إليها كل ما تحتاجه الإمارات من المؤن ومن البضائع. ودبي أيضا مركز لصناعة المراكب الشراعية الكبيرة والصغيرة، ومنها البوم والجلبوس، وهي صناعة تستدعي المهارة والخبرة، ويتقنها الصناع أبا عن جد، إذ هي من الصناعات التقليدية التي اشتهرت بها مدينة دبي. والمدينة تزدهر فيها التجارة وتمتلئ شوارعها بالحوانيت التي تبيع جميع أصناف البضائع والمنتجات، وصناعات المجوهرات والحلى التي تصنع محليا. وتوجد كذلك صناعة الدلة من النحاس لإنتاج أباريق القهوة بصورة خاصة. واللؤلؤ له أسواقه، لأن مياه الخليج تضم أعظم مراعي اللؤلؤ في العالم، وله تجار خبيرون بأنواعه وأحجامه ويعملون على تصديره إلى مختلف بلاد العالم. وخور دبي الذي يقسم المدينة ذو منظر جميل خلاب، والحركة فيه تستمر بنشاط، إذ تقوم الزوارق بنقل السكان من أحد قسمي المدينة إلى الآخر. ويساعد على ازدهار التجارة في المدينة البنك البريطاني في الشرق الأوسط. وهناك مشروع لتوسيع خور دبي وتعميقه حتى تستطيع المراكب الكبيرة السير فيه وتتمكن أن ترسو أمام الأرصفة والمستودعات تسهيلا للتجارة وتفريغ البضائع. ولا بد لنا أن ننوه بقوة كشافة ساحل عمان المتصالح، ويتألف أفرادها من أبناء الإمارات المتصالحة، وهي تيسر لهؤلاء الشباب حياة النظام والتدريب العسكري، وفيها يتعلمون فن اللاسلكي وميكانيك السيارات، لأنها قوة متحركة مجهزة بجميع وسائل النقل الحديثة. إن هذه القوة هي الدرع الواقي الذي يحمي الإمارات المتصالحة ويرد عنها كل عدوان. هذه هي إمارات ساحل عمان المتصالح الذي يدأب حكامها الراشدون بالسهر على رعاية مصالح رعاياهم، ويبذلون كل جهد في سبيل النهوض ببلادهم ماديا ومعنويا بمساعدة حكومة صاحبة الجلالة. وغايتهم المثلى أن يجعلوها بلادا تتيح لأبنائهم فرصة العيش في المستقبل في رغد ورفاهية ورخاء.
وبينما كان الرجل يسعى لكسب رزقه في البحر صيدا أو غوصا في رحلات محفوفة بالأخطار، فقد برعت المرأة في دولة الإمارات في توفير حوائج منزلها وأطفالها، مثل خض اللبن وطحن الحبوب بين حجري الرحى وغزل الصوف وصنع القدور من الطين، بكل ما فيه من تعب ودقة وحرفية.
الديني البدائي والبسيط موجود في مختلف الدول العربية والإسلامية على مر العصور، لأنه مرتبط بالإحساس والواجب الديني. وكان التعليم في تلك المرحلة لا يتعدى في أحوال كثيرة قراءة القرآن وتحفيظه للتلاميذ، ونادرا ما كان التلميذ يصل إلى ما بعد ختم القرآن ويتلقى شيئا من العلوم الأخرى كمبادئ الكتابة ومتابعة النصوص الفقهية والحساب.
وأما طريق العين فقد كانت كثبانا رملية لا تستطيع أن تقطعها إلا على الجمال، وفي هذه الحالة كانت الرحلة شاقة وتستمر 6 أيام على الأقل، أو بواسطة سيارات اللاند روفر، وهي رحلة شاقة أيضا تزيد على 4 ساعات، وكثيرا ما تستمر أكثر لتعطل السيارات. خلال 20 عاما قضاها في قلعة المويجعي كانت ذات أثر بالغ في حياته الشخصية. عاش الشيخ زايد ابن سلطان في تلك المنطقة قريبا من البادية، أحب فيها البدو وأحبوه. وشاء الله أن تشرق شمس أبو ظبي وأن ينتقل سمو الشيخ زايد ابن سلطان من المنطقة الشرقية إلى قصر الحكم في مدينة أبو ظبي حاكما للبلاد. لقد كان ذلك في 6 أغسطس عام 1966.
بشارة أخرى أهلت على أديم السماء. أول طائرة نفاثة لنقل الركاب من الطراز المسمى طبقا للمقام الكوميت، أي النجم المذنب، وقد جاءت بها شركة الخطوط الجوية للشرق الأوسط مبشرة بالعهد الجديد الذي ستصبح فيه أبو ظبي قريبا مركزا رئيسيا للتجارة والمواصلات العالمية. وكما قال الشيخ زايد بحق، إن أعظم مهمة للإقناع هي جعل البشر في جميع أرجاء العالم يكونون أواصر بين بعضهم البعض، والتعاون في هذا الشأن هو ما يريده الله.
في اليوم السادس من شهر يوليو عام 1968 توافد أصحاب العظمة حكام إمارات الخليج العربي، وقد سادت جو المؤتمر روح الأخوة العربية الصادقة والرغبة الأكيدة في التوصل إلى قرار حاسم حول وحدة الإمارات. وقد أقر المؤتمرون بالإجماع قيام الاتحاد، وتألف مجلس مؤقت للاتحاد، وشكلت لجان التنفيذ، وبوشر بعد ذلك في إنجاز المهمات والخطوات اللازمة لإقامة دولة الاتحاد، دولة قوية ذات سيادة كاملة. ومنذ ذلك المؤتمر التاريخي الذي سمي بمؤتمر أبو ظبي، وإمارة أبو ظبي يتردد اسمها على كل لسان.
في صباح 15 من آذار عام 1969 ميلادية وصلت بحفظ الله ورعايته طائرة عظمة الحاكم إلى مطار الكويت الدولي، وما إن أطل عظمته من باب الطائرة حتى بدأت المدفعية تطلق 21 طلقة إيذانا بوصول عظمته. وعند باب الطائرة استقبل عظمته أخوه صاحب العظمة سمو الشيخ صباح السالم الصباح أمير دولة الكويت، وقد تعانق الزعيمان لهذا اللقاء الأخوي الكبير. وتقدمت طفلتان من عظمة حاكم البلاد وأخيه سمو أمير دولة الكويت، وقدمتا لهما باقات الزهور. وبعد ذلك توجه عظمته وسمو أمير دولة الكويت إلى منصة الشرف، حيث أدى أفراد الحرس الأميري التحية وعزفت الموسيقى السلامين الأميريين لأبو ظبي والكويت. ثم تفقد الزعيمان العربيان حرس الشرف، وبعد ذلك قام سعادة كبير الأمناء بتقديم المستقبلين إلى عظمة حاكم أبو ظبي، وفي مقدمتهم سعادة رئيس مجلس الأمة الكويتي، وأصحاب السعادة شيوخ آل الصباح والوزراء ورئيس الحرس الوطني ورئيس ديوان المحاسبة ورئيس الأركان العامة ونائب رئيس مجلس الأمة والمحافظون ووكيل وزارة الداخلية ووكيل وزارة الخارجية ورؤساء البعثات الدبلوماسية العربية والأجنبية في الكويت. وتوجه الزعيمان العربيان بعد ذلك إلى قاعة التشريفات، حيث أمضيا قليلا من الوقت في استراحة قصيرة تبادلا خلالها الأحاديث الودية وتناولا الشاي والقهوة العربية. ثم توجه موكبهما إلى قصر السلام، يتقدمه ركب من الدراجات النارية من أفراد الحرس الأميري، ويتبعه رتل من السيارات يقل مرافقي عظمة الحاكم وكبار مستقبليه. وقد اخترق الموكب شوارع مدينة الكويت التي ازدانت بأعلام البلدين الشقيقين، وامتلأت جوانبهما بجموع أبناء الشعب الذين استقبلوا الموكب بالهتاف والترحيب. ولدى وصول الموكب إلى قصر السلام أدت التحية ثلة من أفراد الحرس الأميري، ثم اصطحب عظمة حاكم البلاد أخوه صاحب السمو أمير دولة الكويت إلى قاعة الاستقبال الكبرى، حيث تناولا ومن في معيتهما القهوة العربية. وبعد شهرين تقريبا من انتهاء زيارة عظمة الحاكم الشيخ زايد إلى الكويت الشقيق، وبعد الظهر توجه موكب عظمته لحضور اجتماعات الدورة الثالثة للمجلس الأعلى لاتحاد الإمارات العربية، الذي عقد فيما بين 10 و15 من شهر أيار عام 1969، والمؤلف من الحكام ال9 للإمارات، وهي قطر، أبو ظبي، البحرين، دبي، الشارقة، أم القوين، رأس الخيمة، عجمان، الفجيرة. وقد بدأ المؤتمر اجتماعاته بأن انتخب حاكم قطر الشيخ أحمد بن علي آل ثاني رئيسا للدورة الثالثة بالإجماع. وقد لعبت أبو ظبي دورا إيجابيا في المؤتمر، بحيث كانت تقرب وجهات النظر حول ضرورة قيام الاتحاد بشكل عملي وثابت. واستطاع عظمة حاكم أبو ظبي الشيخ زايد بن سلطان آل نهيان أن يقدم الحلول العملية لأكثر المقترحات التي طرحت، والتي كان لها الفضل في النهاية على إجماع الكل أن في الاتحاد قوة.
الفاصل الزمني بين تسلم صاحب السمو الشيخ زايد حكم إمارة أبو ظبي وقيام دولة
1968 إرساء أسس اتحاد الإمارات ال7 عند الاستقلال، بعد ذلك بحوالي 4 سنوات. ومن الإمارات الأخرى الأعضاء الشارقة التي يحكمها صاحب السمو الشيخ سلطان بن محمد القاسمي. يتولى مجلس أعلى مكون من جميع حكام الإمارات كامل المسؤولية عن السياسة العامة للبلاد وتصديق قوانينها ومتابعة تنفيذ اتفاق يهدف إلى تعزيز أواصر الاتحاد، وبالإضافة إلى أصحاب السمو الشيخ زايد والشيخ راشد والشيخ سلطان، يضم الاتحاد أيضا حاكم رأس الخيمة صاحب السمو الشيخ صقر بن محمد القاسمي، وحكام الإمارات الثلاث الأخرى الأصغر مساحة وهي الفجيرة وأم القوين وعجمان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تشكل وزارتنا الفتية تالي أسمائهم: صاحب السمو الشيخ مكتوم بن راشد نائب رئيس الوزراء.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
صاحب السمو الشيخ حمدان بن محمد نائب رئيس الوزراء.
أقسم بالله العلي العظيم أني أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أكون واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح الشعب الاتحاد وآيته كله، وأن أحافظ محافظة التامة على كمال الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
صاحب السمو الشيخ حمدان بن راشد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي الدكتور مانع سعيد العتيبي وزير الدكتور.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
شيخ سلطان بن أحمد المعلم.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي محمد سعيد المولى وزير المواصلات.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
شيخ محمد بن راشد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي محمد خليفة الكندي وزير الأشغال العامة والإسكان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي سعيد سلمان وزير التربية والتعليم والشباب.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي سعيد الغيث وزير الدولة ومجلس الوزراء.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي عبد العزيز القاسمي وزير الإعلام.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي محمد عبد الرحمن البكر وزير العدل.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي وزير الزراعة والثروة السمكية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي حميد بن ناصر الأويس.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي سيف الجروان وزير العمل والشؤون الاجتماعية.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيان الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
معالي حمد عبد الرحمن المتفاوز.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أكون مخلصا للإمارات العربية المتحدة، وأن أحترم دستور الاتحاد وقوانينه، وأن أؤدي واجباتي بالأمانة، وأن أرعى مصالح شعب الاتحاد رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ محافظة تامة على كيانة الاتحاد وسلامة أراضيه.
In the late 1960s, the British announced they would soon be leaving the Arabian Gulf for good, ending treaties that had bound them to the region for more than a century. British military power had kept the Arab people of the southern Gulf secure from enemy threats. British diplomats had dictated their foreign affairs. Now, the seven emirates and their rulers would have to stand alone in an increasingly complicated and dangerous world. One man saw that to survive, the seven must become one. Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan's vision of a federation of emirates was born long before the British decided to go home. But their departure was an opportunity to make the dream a reality. Some doubted it could be achieved. At the time, the Gulf Emirates were sparsely populated and poor. Most roads were desert tracks, many communities little more than coral and palm frond houses. Clean water, electricity, proper health care, and a basic education had only recently become commonplace. Abu Dhabi was exporting oil, which had also been found in commercial quantities in Dubai. Sheikh Zayed knew that building a nation would be a formidable task. With Abu Dhabi and Dubai both committed to the cause of federation, a deal was struck that would bring the United Arab Emirates into existence on December 2, 1971. In the days before federation, Abu Dhabi took time off to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the succession of Sheikh Zayed. Watching the festivities was the photographer Bruno Barbe, whose images have left us a unique record of those moments. Banquets were held. A grand parade marched down the Corniche, followed by fireworks and camel races. Bruno Barbe also shot the most anticipated event of all, a performance by Kulthum. The lady of Arabic song, Kulthum, arrived to a rapturous reception at Abu Dhabi airport, accompanied by her orchestra and entourage. She met with Sheikh Khalifa, the Crown Prince, then gave 2 performances for the sheikhs and thousands of fans in Abu Dhabi at a new concert hall specially built for the occasion. Before leaving, Kulthum was given a fabulous pearl necklace as a thank you gift from Sheikh Zayed. The necklace remained in the family after her death in 1973, but was sold at auction 2 years ago and has since returned to Abu Dhabi. On the eve of federation, Ras Al Khaimah had not yet decided to join the Union of Arab Emirates, when Iran used military force to invade the Greater and Lesser Tomb Islands. The local population were expelled, and one of the defenders killed, prompting international protests and demonstrations on the streets. The United Arab Emirates was born on the morning of December 2, 1971. The 6 rulers of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Al-Qaywain, and Fujairah gathered at the Majlis of Sheikh Rashid in Jumeirah, watched by the world's press and television. After signing the Proclamation of Union, the 6 rulers elected Sheikh Zayed as the nation's first president, and Sheikh Rashid the first prime minister.
وقد تم في هذا اليوم المبارك التوقيع على الدستور المؤقت للإمارات العربية المتحدة. وإذ نزف هذه البشرى السارة إلى الشعب العربي الكريم، نرجو الله تعالى أن يكون هذا الاتحاد نواة لاتحاد شامل يضم باقي أفراد الأسرة من الإمارات الشقيقة التي لم تمكنها ظروفها الحاضرة من التوقيع على هذا الدستور.
Outside, cannons blazed a 21-gun salute, and the audience watched as the nation's flag was raised for the first time. Among them was Sheikh Zayed's private secretary, Al-Hajj Al-Mihirbi, who still recalls the emotions on the president's face at the moment when his dream became reality.
If you see him here, like see his face, you know? He's looked the flag, but in something you see in his eyes that he's thinking, no, okay, no, we win now as a union. We are independent now. You know, when you have a dream and you wake up, there's a dream, but this is a real dream. If you see them, look his eye to the flag, you see his face, it is not angry, and he is not face of a protocol, no. It is natural. You can see, like it's natural. Say, it is done. My dream. This is the flag. So they ask, they are looking to them why he's not pushed the line to, but he wants to see the flag. That's, you see his face? He's a father. He's a master.
A common sight almost anywhere in the world. But here in Dubai on the Arabian Gulf, the problem is new. The problem, one of communications. A problem that is growing almost daily as the country exploits its wealth and expands its trade. A wealth and trade that during the last few years have grown out of all recognition. For many years, the twin towns of Deira and Shindagar were linked by a single bridge, which, though now twinned, still causes delays due to the opening of bascules. Bascules built to allow free passage to waterborne traffic plying up and down the creek. Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, therefore commissioned Sir William Halcrow and partners to carry out a feasibility study for a new and more direct link between the two towns. A bridge nearer to the sea was not possible. The reason being the same as when the original bridge was sited: the location of a construction site for offshore oil production jackets that require direct access to the sea. The route down to the sea, therefore, through the core Dubai, had to remain open at all times. To link Shindagar and Deira, there was only one possible solution for Sir William Halcrow and partners to design for building, near the mouth of the creek, a tunnel. This would enable the creek to continue to be used not only to take the jackets down to the open sea, but also allow the stream of small craft to tie up at their traditional moorings. An added advantage of a tunnel would be its proximity to Port Rashid, also designed by Sir William Halcrow and partners,
and recently completed by Costain Civil Engineering Limited, who were now awarded the contract for constructing the tunnel. Preliminary studies demonstrated the feasibility of both immersed and dry methods of construction. Costain, however, elected to build the tunnel in the dry. Stage 1 envisaged the dredging back of the Dera bank to form a new channel for shipping, and the building of a cofferdam out into the creek from the Shindaga side. From this side, excavation was to take place, and the building of the tunnel commenced once pumping had dried out the area. Stage 2 would be to create an island in the middle of the creek, reopen the original navigable channel, now between the island and Shindaga, close the diverted channel, build a new cofferdam linking the island and the Dera bank, pump the area dry, and start building the tunnel from Dera towards the island. Finally, on completion, the original bank would be reinstated. This was the plan. The cofferdam, driven out into the creek from the Shindaga bank, would form a protection for the first stage, and inside it, ramps would be excavated. Construction in the dry meant that the water table, lying just below the surface, would have to be drawn down. To achieve this, a well pointing system would be installed and the water table lowered. A progression of well points installed at increasingly lower levels would enable excavation to continue. At the deepest part of the excavation, well pointing would be insufficient and would have to be complemented by a system of drainage channels dug laterally across the excavation, allowing seepage to be collected at sumps and pumped directly into the creek. This was the method which would continue throughout, and construction began. For economy in design, the thickness of the base was varied, and where stress is permitted, a haunched profile was adopted. Firstly, the haunches were excavated out to a level below the ramps cut for the main foundations. The entire area was then blinded with a weak concrete mix, on which was laid the bituthene waterproofing membrane. To protect the membrane, a concrete screed was then introduced. And on the screed was placed the reinforced concrete base. The walls of the vehicular tunnels were then built, and later the outside wall of what was to be the pedestrian subway and services tunnel, to be followed by the roof of the main tunnels and the roof of the pedestrian subway. Each operation continuing simultaneously at an agreed distance one behind the other, governed by the gain in strength of the previous concreting operation. Once the roof was completed, the bituthene was brought up the walls and over the roof to provide an enclosing waterproof seal. Protection for the bituthene covering the outside walls was provided by concrete blockwork, and for the roof by a concrete screed. The excavation and structure were then backfilled. The roof of the section of tunnel below the navigable channel of the creek was given extra protection against possible damage by shipping by the placing of a layer of rock armoring. Once the work from the Shindaga side had advanced to the full extent of the Coffer Dam, the island was formed, and work commenced from the Dera bank and the tunnel completed. A new link between Shindaga and Dera has now been forged. A new efficiency within Dubai created, and the most modern tunnel in the Gulf is now in operation. Opened in December 1975 by Sheikh Khalifa bin Hamid Al Thani, ruler of Qatar, in the presence of Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan, the President of the United Arab Emirates, and Sheikh Rashid bin Zayed Al Maktoum, Vice President of the Emirates and ruler of Dubai. It marks yet another step forward in their close cooperation and design for the future.
For 200,000 years, man has lived and thrived in the southeastern corner of the Arabian Peninsula. But it's only in the last 100 years or so that he has been able to appreciate this beguiling part of the globe from a very different angle, from above. Bridging the Arabian Gulf and the Arabian Sea is a thriving federation of 7 emirates: Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Al Quwain, Ras Al Khaimah, and Fujairah. Together, they form the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. From ultra-modern cities to mighty mountain ranges, from vast expanses of barren desert to lush and fertile oases. Seen from up above, it's as though someone had traveled the world, collected its best features, and then brought them all together in an artful blend. Beauty, nature, majesty, industry, fantasy. All of life is in the UAE. The Emirate of Abu Dhabi, home to the Federation's capital city, captures the energy and ambition of the UAE. Early in the last century, Abu Dhabi drew its riches from the sea. It produced some of the world's most lustrous pearls. But in the 1950s, they found another and even greater treasure beneath their feet: oil. It was to fuel the extraordinary growth of Abu Dhabi, led by its ruler Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. Zayed brought the 7 emirates together to create the United Arab Emirates and became its first president. He was a visionary, and one of his many legacies is a transformed Abu Dhabi. Located on a 14-kilometer-long island, its skyscrapers surge upwards like rising bars on a graph, and its skyline is studded with architectural statements. One of the finest is the Sheikh Zayed Mosque, the Sheikh's final resting place and the largest mosque in the UAE. This awesome edifice in white marble features 4 minarets of up to 107 meters and some 82 domes. Inside, there is room for more than 40,000 worshippers. No less understated is the building that cost $3 billion to create, the Emirates Palace Hotel. This hotel to end all hotels was 4 years in construction and reflects the hues and shades of the Arabian desert. Its grand atrium, the largest of the hotel's 114 domes, is 72 meters tall. But just when you thought that Abu Dhabi must surely have everything, much of the city is being transformed again by the Plan Abu Dhabi 2030 initiative. Indeed, this culture of investment includes the largest commitment by any government in the world to develop renewable energy. This is Masdar, home of the world's first carbon-neutral city, where its giant solar panels can produce up to 10 megawatts of electricity. That's enough to power some 8,000 homes. From clean power to horsepower, Abu Dhabi's Yas Island has become internationally famous. In November 2009, it hosted the inaugural Formula One Grand Prix to worldwide acclaim. And not only for its state-of-the-art circuit, here you can arrive by private yacht and even watch the race from your suite at the luxurious Yas Hotel. For golfers, the falcon-shaped clubhouse of the Abu Dhabi Golf Club means golf of the highest caliber. This includes the Abu Dhabi Golf Championship, which has been part of the European Tour since 2006. But for all Abu Dhabi's hunger to build, improve and transform, the Emirate is also focused on conservation. Leading the way is Sir Bani Yas Island, 170 kilometers west of the city, and another legacy of Sheikh Zayed. His passion for wildlife led him to turn the 87 square kilometer island into an Arabian wildlife park. In the process, he safeguarded the future of endangered species such as the sand gazelle and the Arabian oryx. And offshore, the waters ripple with marine life, such as dolphins, dugongs and sea turtles. In stark contrast to Abu Dhabi is Rub Al Khali, the empty quarter, and it's not hard to see why. There is virtually nothing here, unless of course you're looking for desert. This vast expanse of sand runs for more than 1,000 kilometers from the UAE into Saudi Arabia. Years can pass without any rainfall here, and its sand dunes can reach heights of 400 meters, their crescents sculpted by the wind. Rub Al Khali comprises most of the southern third of the Arabian Peninsula, 650,000 square kilometers of emptiness. But then, sitting on the edge of Rub Al Khali, we come to the Liwa Oasis. After the seemingly endless expanse of gold, splashes of green signify life, crops and man. The Liwa Crescent contains a natural aquifer, and the oasis supports the inhabitants of its 50 villages. Today, tourism has augmented the once traditional living of hunting and date crops. The Liwa Hotel has now been joined by the 5-star resort of Qasr Al Sarab. For tourists who want to experience traditional desert life, albeit in a rather more comfortable way. And as the sun comes up like a flaming coin on the horizon, no visit to the desert is complete without a balloon ride, floating over the red tapestry of sands as we head to the oasis of Al Ain. Lush vegetation, trees, crops. We're now near the Oman border in Abu Dhabi's second largest city. In Arabic, Al Ain means spring and is also known as the Garden City. For more than 7,000 years, people have lived here served by Al Ain's oases. And the ancient Falaj irrigation system is still used to bring water from boreholes and natural springs to irrigate the city's numerous farms. Al Ain is rich in recent history. The Al-Jahili fort was built in 1898 by Sheikh Zayed I and became his summer residence. On the western edge of the main oasis stands the Al Ain Palace. This was once the home of the father of the UAE, Sheikh Zayed, who was governor of the city. It is now a museum. On the outskirts lies Jebel Hafit mountain, which rises to over 1,000 meters. It gives fine views of the city and, inside, has an extensive network of caves. The 12-kilometer road, snaking its way up the mountain, has been hailed as the world's greatest driving road and is popular with international cyclists who travel here to train. Heading east, you come to the Hafit graves, sitting like beehives on the dusty ground. Dating back as far as 3200 BC, they represent some of the UAE's ancient history. This beehive cairn design is typical of tombs from this period. From the largest emirate, Abu Dhabi, we come to the most populated, the vibrant, teeming hub of Dubai. Like many major urban centers, its waterway helped to build its fortune by establishing Dubai as a city of trade and commerce. The saltwater Dubai Creek, or Khor Dubai, runs for 14 kilometers and divides the city into two distinct areas, Dira and Bur Dubai. And for many, the creek's bustling banks are the soul of the city. If you want to cross the creek, you have several modern options, but none has quite the atmosphere and tradition as the Abras, Dubai's fleet of small wooden boats. Down at the end of the creek, and a million miles from the urban sprawl, is the Ras Al Khor Wildlife Sanctuary. Over 6 square kilometers of protected wetland with a variety of ecosystems providing a haven for wildlife. If you take away one image, it will probably be the flamingos that bring twitchers and other nature lovers from far and wide. However, it's impossible to describe Dubai without mentioning skyscrapers. And to take you there, the Sheikh Zayed Road. This 8-lane highway runs south from the creek and parallel to the shoreline. Alternatively, you can take a loftier view by jumping on the new Dubai Metro. Much of the Red Line runs alongside and above the highway. And on your way, you'll find one building doesn't so much scrape the sky as pierce straight through it. The new Burj Khalifa quickly exhausts superlatives. It is the tallest man-made structure in the world. It has the world's fastest and tallest reaching elevators. It has the world's highest observation deck. You can see its spire 90 kilometers away, and at 828 meters, it is twice the height of the Empire State Building. It hasn't come cheap. This mighty edifice has cost more than $1.5 billion to build. But long before it opened, it had already gained legendary status around the world. But then, talked about architecture is a hallmark of this ambitious city. The Burj Al Arab Hotel is the tallest all-suite hotel in the world, reaching some 321 meters up into the sky. The structure stands on a man-made island, capturing the world's imagination with its billowing sail design, inspired by the traditional Arabian dhow. Just off the coast is another bold and joyous concept, the Palm Jumeirah. This island, a palm in the sea, has a main trunk which supports 16 fronds. And there's a crescent-shaped breakwater which, just for good measure, boasts a 5-star resort, Atlantis the Palm, with the largest water park in the Middle East. Dubai's ambitions for the coastline don't end there. This is the world, a series of man-made islands, each representing a country. And yet these bold, big-scale developments sit happily alongside nature. Birds of prey, such as the osprey, are still a firm feature of the shoreline. The superlatives continue. Jebel Ali Port, Dubai's major trading hub, is the world's largest man-made harbour. It's also the biggest port in the whole of the Middle East. Sitting 35 kilometers from the city of Dubai, the area operates as a free zone and has attracted over 5,000 companies from 120 countries. And wherever there's business, pleasure is never far behind. Golf in the Emirates has become more and more popular with each passing year, inspired, no doubt, by world-class tournaments such as the Dubai Desert Classic, the Race to Dubai, and the Dubai Ladies Masters. The Jumeirah Golf Estates, the Emirates Golf Club, the Montgomery, and the Dubai Creek Golf and Yacht Club are some of the clubs combining sport and relaxation with upscale, manicured surroundings. "110 kilometers east of Dubai lies a cool refuge from the summer heat. The town of Hatta is dominated by 2 watchtowers from the 18th century and the Juma Mosque. The town is overlooked by the Hajar Mountains, with breathtaking vistas and cooler temperatures. Heading north of Dubai takes us to our third of the 7 Emirates, Sharjah, the only emirate that touches both the Arabian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. The numerous elegant mosques and no less than 17 excellent museums earned Sharjah the prestigious UNESCO title of Cultural Capital of the Arab World. The city is proud of its fine souks. The Al Majara souk, resplendent with its gleaming gold dome, and the Blue souk, which, with its immaculate gardens and backdrop of the Khalid Lagoon, has been the focus of 1,000 Nikons. Meanwhile, industry is never far away. From the nearby Khalid port and Hamriya port further up the coast, Sharjah provides vital support services to the UAE's offshore oil industry. Sharjah is also a seat of learning, and the University of Sharjah was founded in 1997 to bring together the region's cultural and Islamic values. Within the campus, the American University of Sharjah is emerging as a leading co-educational university, serving students from the Gulf and indeed the world. Education is highly prized in the UAE, and Sharjah's universities show the country's determination to rank alongside the best in the Middle East and the globe. Sharjah is also a major link in the world's supply chain. Along the Gulf of Oman is the town of Khorfakan. It grew around a natural bay, and its deepwater port is now a major international container terminal. Of course, where there's sea, there's fish, and the town of Kalba is a thriving fishing harbour. And at the southernmost tip of the UAE's Indian Ocean coastline, Khor Kalba's extensive mangrove marsh is a designated nature reserve for several endangered species. The UAE's tradition of trade is also alive and well in the port town of Dibba, which lies at the northernmost end of the UAE's east coast. The town is also the site of a fort occupied by the Portuguese in the 1500s. From Sharjah, we move on to the only emirate located entirely on the Gulf of Oman, Fujairah, which stretches along 90 kilometers of UAE coastline. If you like the rugged, untouched beauty of dramatic mountain ranges, or the creature comforts of a sandy palm-fringed beach, or both, Fujairah is exceptionally beautiful. Its 360-year-old Fujairah fort also stands proudly once more, recently restored. It was seriously damaged by a British bombardment in 1925. And if anyone needs confirmation of Fujairah city's prime location, just look out to sea. It is strategically located on key international shipping lanes. Indeed, it is the second largest bunkering port in the world. This emirate is also the home of the UAE's oldest surviving mosque, the Bidya Mosque, which dates back to the 16th century. Back on the Gulf Coast and heading north once more, we come to the smallest of the United Arab Emirates, Ajman. And yet, despite its size, it has been the focus of an intensive construction and development boom in recent years. The port of Ajman sits along a natural creek, attracting ships, dhows and commerce. And in the center of the town, a grand old fort, now a museum, is a reminder of its distinguished past. To the north, we move from the smallest emirate to one that has retained much of its original charm. Al Quwain, which means Mother of Two Powers, was founded in 1775. It too boasts a fine old fort with parts of the original defensive walls still to be seen. It is also beautifully located, built around a blue-green lagoon and is dotted with curved islands which are home to a host of birdlife. To the east of the city lies Tel Abrak, one of the most important archaeological sites in the whole of the UAE. Originally located on the coast before the sea waters receded, the site was inhabited for 2,000 years until around 300 BC. And so we come to our seventh and last of the United Arab Emirates, Ras Al Khaimah. Its name means top of the tent, and it's the west coast's most northerly emirate. People have lived here for many thousands of years, serving and profiting from the major trade routes to Asia. Today, however, the city is reinventing itself as a tourist destination, and you can see why. To the north lie wetlands with mangroves that provide a natural habitat for flamingos. It also borders the Hajar Mountains, which have everything from Bedouin villages and camel farms to canyons, gorges, and the highest peak in the country at 1,910 meters. Just twice in recent years, the locals have been enchanted by a rare sighting indeed, real snow. And throughout the mountains, you come across villages in splendid isolation perched on the rugged outcrops. Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Al Quwain, Ras Al Khaimah, and Fujairah. In a world of beautiful places, you could say that the United Arab Emirates has more than its fair share. Mighty acts of nature, extraordinary feats by man, the UAE is a feast of sight and sound, a celebration of the big, the bold, and the inspired. And to see it from above is to bring an extraordinary world to your feet.